So what's our onboarding process? How does it really work? If you're at the point where you're getting ready to say yes, this is what you need to know on how the process is going to unfold. So we have a number of steps in our onboarding process. Let me just start by saying we have strived and gone to great lengths to make it as seamless as possible. And in fact, every time we do it, when we learn something, we go back and improve our checklists. That's iterative improvement. So we start with a best hosting analysis. We look at your site, we look at what functionality it's running, how much horsepower that functionality needs to run well, and what requirements that site has. You know, is it a volume of traffic? It is a complexity of functionality. And then we match that up with the best managed WordPress hosts in the space. Whoever that may be, we'll use our expertise to match your site's needs with the absolute best managed WordPress hosting available. In fact, we'll review that from time to time to make sure that it's still true, because the marketplace changes regularly. Next, we're going to go through and figure out your backup schedule, both in terms of creation, like I talked about in the other video on how we do it. We want to minimize your maximum risk exposure to about 5 or 10 transactions that would be lost if you had a catastrophic error right before your next backup ran. So you had the biggest possible window between your most recently available backup and right now. Then that's the backup creation schedule. Then we have the backup storage and deletion decay schedule, which I also explained in the other video, so I'll do it briefly here. Basically, if you're taking 10 backups a day, you don't need 10 a day from 3 years ago. What you need is a reasonable schedule. So you keep all the backups for a couple of weeks. And then you keep 1 backup per day for a couple of weeks beyond that. And 1 backup per week for a couple of months beyond that. And then 1 backup per month, probably indefinitely. But we tweak that based on how many backups we're creating and what a reasonable decay cycle is. It's kind of like radioactive half-life. Then we create your post-updates functionality checklist. This, I think, is one of the biggest pieces of value that we provide. We work with you together to figure out everything your store does, both on the front end and the back end. So front-end features, you're thinking, well, this is obvious. I mean, can people check out? Well, that's the first thing we check. But after that, maybe it's something as simple as an Ajax suggested product search. So when you start typing a search for a product, it starts suggesting results like Google does. Or maybe it's just selecting the product variations. All of those things get added to a checklist we've got a stock one. We know what WooCommerce does out of the box, but we need to create the ones that are unique to your site. Make that whole checklist, then go to the back end. And there's things you rely on there. You know, you're probably changing order statuses, or maybe you use the capture payment or the refund payment features that are built in. Maybe we added functionality, whether it's plugins or custom driven. All of that gets added to the post updates functionality checklist so that every single time that we run updates on your site, we know that those things are getting checked and your site is working perfectly before it's in the hands of customers. Then we do the actual site migration. So we take your site out of its current hosting environment, probably, unless it happens to already be in the one that we chose it needs to be in. In that case, we would just set up our management rights and access to get that and manage it for you. We'll migrate your site, and that's included. It'll be seamless. We'll take the whole site over, put it in that new environment, give it to you on a development address where you can review it and make sure it works. What do you know? We're going to use that post-updates functionality checklist to test whether everything in the migrated site is doing what the live site does. And then we flip the switch, put it live. There's typically less than 5 minutes of downtime. In reality, in my experience, it's really only a couple of seconds. I just hedge my bets and say it's 5 minutes or less, so I'm never in a position where I'm over-promising and under-delivering. I much prefer the inverse, to under-promise and over-deliver. And then finally, we set up all the monitoring. We set up uptime monitoring. Depending on what plan level you're on, we may also set up speed monitoring that we review often. And so that if anything ever goes wrong with your site, we're the first ones to know, let alone you being the first ones to know, so that your customers aren't the first ones to know. And a lot of them, you'd be surprised at how many customers will just give up, wander off, and never tell you your site was broken. And when you finally get a customer who sends you an email and says, man, I'm having a real hard time checking out today, only to find out your checkout's been broken for a week. I've actually had experiences where clients came to us and said, this is what happened, I need you to fix it. Man, we're going to avoid all of that. And it starts with the onboarding process. So just to recap through it, it's the best hosting analysis. What is the best match between your site's needs and the best managed WordPress environments available today, creating your backup schedule, both in terms of creation and the half-life decay of how long we store those backups, then creation of the post-updates functionality checklist for both front-end and back-end features, migrating your site into our environment, then using that checklist itself to check to make sure it all works, then launching it and setting up monitoring. And at that point, you're a woobetter customer. The last detail to mention is that your onboarding fee includes your first month of service. So it'll take us way less than a full month to do all of this and get it done and launched, and then you're off and running on your plan.